Welcome to this video on what is co-creation. Now we're talking about leadership, so that means we're talking about influence, but not all influence is created equal. Let's explore 3 different ways that you could go about influencing other people and what impact that has on the level of ownership and alignment that you achieve. So here are 3 different models. I'm going to draw them. The first could be described like this. This is the classic top-down model of leadership, where person A in the relationship has much more power than person B. Person B has a very limited amount of influence. For example, it would be like a parent-child relationship where the dad says to the son, hey, wear the blue jacket today. And the son says, well, I don't want to wear the blue jacket. And the dad says, well, tough luck, wear it anyways. Now, this is the kind of relationship which has, as I said, person A has the power, person B is all about compliance and execution. Now, this may not be the most popular form of leadership, but it still exists in the world today in order to achieve maximum amount of compliance. We could call this top-down. Top-down. Compliance and execution. Right? The second model is the one that's most common in most meetings in the world today. And it looks like this. So person A still has more power and more control in this relationship, but person B is, has a say, let's say. And so what this would look like in practice is, let's say your boss comes into the meeting and says something like, today we need to decide, we have 2 suppliers, we need to decide on which supplier we want to choose. Is it supplier 1 or supplier 2? I think it should be supplier 2, and here are all my reasons. Now person B has the option to stay quiet and say nothing, probably because they don't want to create any conflict, they don't want to disagree with the boss, or because they haven't given it any thought, they haven't been given time to give it any thought, or maybe they do disagree and they say, well, actually, I think it should be a supplier 2, and here are my reasons. And what happens is person A listens, but only listens as much as to be able to respond. So the moment they finish speaking, they'll jump back in and say, well, this is why I think you're wrong, this is why I think I'm right. And you may hear things like, oh, I hear what you're saying, or to build on your ideas. And those are just nice words, but really behind it is, listen to what I'm saying, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm trying to convince you that this is the way it goes. So this is not much listening, no listening, or at least no deep listening, and it's characterized by persuasion, and often there's a sense of conflict which is unresolved. And then the third mode, or the third method, is where you have person A and you have person B, and then in the middle you have the business problem, right? And this is where there's no hierarchy in the room, and there's a sense of, well, I don't know the answer, and I want to co-create and discover that answer. So whereas this might be, we might have called this compromise, right? We could call that compromise. This is top-down. This is co-creation. And this is where I genuinely don't know. So what you might hear in a conversation like this is lots of open-ended questions, like, what do you think about that? Or what are your perspectives? Or what have you tried in the past? And what you might also hear is pauses where people are stopping to reflect because they're listening deeply. This was listening to respond. This is listening to understand. So somebody says something, you take a pause, you reflect on it, and then you might ask another question or respond accordingly. So this is characterized by pauses, questions, and you may hear the words, I wonder if this is possible, I wonder if that would work, that kind of conversation. And this is all about high levels of ownership and thinking together, working together, and deep levels of listening. Listening to understand, not just to respond. So I already mentioned it, but the implications of these 3 modes on ownership is quite significant. In this one, you require more investment of dialogue, it takes more time, you have to ask more questions, but the level of ownership that you achieve on the other side is much more significant because people have been invested in the discussion, they've really thought about it, they've been heard, and then whatever the results are, they're much more likely to be committed to those results. So co-creation is essentially the process of working and thinking together in order to produce results that are greater than the sum of the individual parts. So it's not just 1 person plus 1 person equals 2, it's 1 plus 1 equals 3 or 5 or 50. That's what we're trying to get to. It's the idea of synergistic thinking, collective thinking, where we get inspired and insightful because we're working together. And this is characterized by three things, really. One is people feel represented by the process. They are able to think together, and also they are more committed to taking actions. And all of this is based on a fundamental understanding of separate realities. When you understand that we're living in a separate reality, that people is creating their reality moment by moment, then it becomes natural for you to be curious about what's driving the other person's reality, what's their thinking, and what is possible in this conversation. Co-creation really is a fundamental skill of scaling your leadership, because it means, again, that people have more ownership and therefore more commitment, more problem-solving capabilities, and that allows you to not be the bottleneck and to encourage and inspire others to do their best work. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for listening.